I guess we have to talk about this. I assume most of you will have seen this image within the past couple of days, but on the off chance that you haven't, I want you to take a good long look. Really drink it in. Visual messaging doesn't get much more clear and unambiguous than this, and the visual message here is, hey, Mr. and Mrs. America, fuck your country, fuck your values, fuck your flag, the sex perverts are your new overlords, LGBTism is your new state religion, and the dumb Skittle vomit flag is the banner to which you owe all reverence and allegiance henceforth. Not the other one with all the silly stars and stripes. And we've made the message extra super duper clear by actually giving pride of place to the dumb Skittle vomit flag, which represents no country or polity or institution, but simply exists to celebrate what people do with their genitals, and shunting the old outdated national flag off to the margins. And you know what? Maybe we could add a fun little extra fuck you by displaying the two marginalized U.S. flags backward. It'll be great. Yeah, this is probably another job for Hanlon's razor, I think. I'm not even sure where the boundary would be in this case between incompetence and malice, much less to which one the act should be attributed. On the one hand, I have an extremely hard time believing a person who is in charge of displaying U.S. flags at the White House wouldn't know the rules of displaying the U.S. flag. On the other hand, Sam Sticky Fingers Britton and Admiral Danglin Dick Levine both exist. Which is to say, we know Joe Biden's administration doesn't have any problem hiring comically incompetent people for important jobs if they happen to tick the right intersectional boxes. Also, speaking of that, I remain unconvinced that Mayor Pete is really a homosexual, but that's a topic for another time. Frankly, I think I'm going to need to see a sex tape. Now, the rules for vertically displaying the U.S. flag are fairly simple and easy to remember. Even more so, one would assume, if that's your fucking job. When displayed vertically, the flag is supposed to assume the same orientation as if it was lying over a casket. And when it's lying over a casket, the canton is supposed to go over the heart or the left side of the decedent. And that's it. So we are left with one of two possibilities. Either the person in charge of raising the flags at the White House is as bad at his job as Joe Biden is at his job. The job of being the president, I mean, not the job of running a family organized crime syndicate. Or the people who organized this National Hooray for Sex Perverts party hate America and its flag and its people with such a hot, fiery, intense passion burning like 1,000 suns that they displayed the flags backward just to emphasize and underscore the extent of said hatred. Is either one of those eventualities more or less likely than the other? I can't see how, frankly. I think Hanlon's razor is perfectly balanced this time. We can't ascribe it to malice when it is adequately explained by incompetence, but we also can't discount the extent of anti-American malice that exists inside the current administration. Now, Joe Biden gave a speech at this event, and in the few brief passages where he could be understood clearly, he didn't tell us how ostentatious celebrations of non-normative sexualities add value to society or make the country a better place or our union a more perfect one. No, he mostly just talked about how extreme MAGA Republicans are attacking innocent children and families by saying hateful things like, how about we don't castrate children? Because that's all it takes to be proclaimed a filthy, awful bigot in Joe Biden's America. And also by not buying Bud Light. Not buying Bud Light means you totally hate the gays. So if you didn't drink Bud Light before because it tastes like flat, watered-down horse piss, well, you have to start drinking Bud Light now. And you have to like it too, goddammit. To prove that you're an ally of the LGBTQIA EIEIO community. Oh, and there's another fun thing that happened at the White House Sex Pervert-a-Palooza on Sunday. Apparently a couple of dudes with tits got so swept up in the spirit of the occasion, they stripped off their tops and started prancing about the South Lawn, jiggling their fake sweater puppies for everybody to see. And those two individuals have now been banned from any further White House events. Is that a limiting principle? Did we find a limiting principle? Finally, we found a line of sex perversion that the Biden administration is unwilling to celebrate unconditionally. And all it took was men with fake boobs disrobing in the presence of the nation's chief executive at the People's House. The White House even went so far as to issue a statement calling the behavior inappropriate and disrespectful. But I guess that then begs the question, what exactly are the standards of behavioral protocol for an event whose entire purpose is celebrating freaky sex? From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where freaky sex is a private matter between a man and his sheep, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And there was an historic moment in U.S. history earlier this week, Monday afternoon to be exact, when Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa read out a statement confirming the existence of apparent audio recordings of Joe and Hunter Biden both personally accepting bribe payments from Ukrainian oligarchs during Joe Biden's second term as vice president. So, in other words, during the time after which he had been famously made the point man for U.S. policy in that particular country. These recordings, should they exist, and should they contain what Senator Grassley says they do, well, they would be the most damning evidence of criminal corruption in the history of the presidency or the vice presidency. When Spiro Agnew was forced to resign the vice presidency in late 1973, the charges against him were of a similar character. Agnew was alleged to have taken money and goods and services in exchange for a promise to influence U.S. policy in a direction favorable to the people paying the bribe, which, of course, is how bribery works. But this was right when the Watergate scandal was really starting to heat up. It was starting to look like there was a real possibility of Nixon resigning or being impeached. But the Republicans and the Democrats both agreed they didn't want to see the presidency handed to Mr. Agnew. So there was a need to install somebody else in the number 2 spot who would be more agreeable as a replacement for Nixon. So they pushed Agnew out the door and replaced him with Jerry Ford, who of course was duly sworn in as the 38th president 10 months later in August of '74. Did Agnew wind up doing any jail time? Of course he didn't. He pleaded no contest, paid a $10,000 fine, and got 3 years of unsupervised probation. The whole point of that exercise was getting him out of the way so the deep state and the proto-fake news media could finish the job of bringing down Nixon. But even if the worst of the allegations against Agnew were 100% true, and there's not much evidence that they were, he at least was accused of taking bribes from Americans for the benefit of American companies. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he's accused of taking bribe payments from foreign oligarchs and gangsters. The statement Chuck Grassley read out on Monday afternoon represents the most severe accusation of criminal malfeasance ever leveled against a president or a vice president, period, full stop. In fact, I will repeat that statement a second time. These are the most severe accusations of criminal malfeasance ever leveled at a president or a vice president. And that sounds like a hell of a big news story, doesn't it? Wouldn't you think that in a sane country with a functioning journalistic establishment, every network would have been carrying this thing live? A sitting senator saying there's audio-visual evidence of the current president taking cash bribes from foreign gangsters in exchange for government policy considerations? No high-ranking U.S. government official has ever been the subject of an allegation like that one. My own former Congressman, Randy Duke Cunningham, went to prison for almost a decade and a half for taking bribes to influence the awarding of defense contracts. This allegation against Joe Biden makes that crime look like stealing a goddamn candy bar by comparison. So that's a hell of a big damn story for all the networks not to cover, right? When the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee announces that the current president might be the actual worst criminal in the history of the executive branch, I mean, there must have been some other really big, hugely important story that was going on at the same time in order for all the networks to turn away from a story like that one, right? Like an O.J. Simpson Bronco chase, or baby Jessica trapped in the well, or Lizzo needing a vat of Crisco and half a dozen firemen to extricate herself from the bathtub, just like President William Howard Taft before her. So what were all the news networks showing instead of the most explosive criminal allegations ever directed at a president or a former president or a future president or a vice president? Well, they were covering the story that really matters. They were covering Donald Trump riding in a car, and then getting in an airplane. And how dare you, you filthy bastards, ever besmirch the good name of our professional journalist class by calling them fake news performance artists? These are hard-working, dedicated public servants committed to the pursuit of cold, hard facts, speaking truth to power, never showing fear or favor, and lovingly wiping Joe Biden's bottom hole each time he messes the bed. So let's go ahead and dispel this sick right-wing MAGA extremist conspiracy theory. You should always trust the legacy news media. If you don't, then you hate democracy. And you're probably a racist. The legacy news media are a cherished institution. Just ask them. They will tell you all about how cherished they are. They are almost as cherished as the FBI, whom you're also not allowed to criticize. Unless you want to wind up on a domestic terrorism watch list, the point I'm making here is, when the legacy news media cover a thing, that's the thing you should care about. When they don't cover a thing, well, that's because you don't need to know about it. That's why they are the professional journalists. They just want to help you discern the real information from the misinformation and the disinformation. From Russia. It can be tempting to look elsewhere for information on stories that we, the legacy news media, are declining to cover, but that makes you a candidate for radicalization, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And you also, of course, are a handmaiden for Putin, because Putin is everywhere. So when we, the impartial, unbiased legacy news media, who totally are not sad, pitiful, no self-respect, having water-carrying stooges for the regime, when we tell you that a private citizen riding in an automobile and going up some airplane stairs is vastly more important than the current president of the United States, possibly having sold out his country to foreign criminals in exchange for fat bags of cash, your job is to trust our judgment. We know what is important. You do not. We only want what's best for you. You don't need to worry your feeble little brains out there in flyover country over what to believe and what not to believe. You're too busy doing your Bible and your guns and slopping the hogs or whatever the hell else it is you people do out there in the continental interior. Just only pay attention to the things we show you and never question our wildly partisan conclusions, and you will be much happier in life. Also, never cancel your cable TV subscription. Pretty please. We're actually begging. What do you think, Jim Eagle? Is it time for the Pride Month update? I think it's time for the Pride Month update. Best Pride Month ever. And the newest major brand to publicly self-immolate itself on the pyre of performative wokeness? Call of Duty. A game where the point is killing lots of people with guns. Look, I'm not a video game guy. Don't pretend to be one. I usually lose at least 1 or 2 subscribers each time I talk about video games. Because I guess gamers don't like it when I point out the fact that in my own experience, I stopped caring about video games approximately 4 seconds after I touched my first boob. And I can't conceive of being a grown adult, especially a grown adult in one's 30s or 40s, who plays freaking video games every day. I think that's weird and probably not altogether healthy. Freely admit I'm in the minority here, because I live in a world where people will actually tune in on television to watch other people play video games. Where professional video gaming and video game leagues are a real thing. But enough about that. Here ends the obligatory video game disclaimer. I may not know all that much about that whole world, but I am reasonably certain that Call of Duty is a rather hugely successful game franchise built around a series of games whose object is to kill lots of people with guns. You wouldn't think the people running a brand like that would want to go alienating huge numbers of their customers over something like Gay Pride Month. What's the upside for that brand exactly? Isn't it a lot like Bud Light? Like there are lots of gay and trans people who would start finding your military guns and war video game more appealing if you threw in a bit of radical gender activism? Is that how that works? It's like I keep telling you, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a woman in your early to mid-30s, as most of these woke marketing executives are, you've been in woke school since day one, depending on what state you're from. If you're born in 86, 87, you were starting school right at the time that we started doing many of the things that have utterly wrecked our educational system in the time since. You start college in the mid-2000s, right when the university culture is starting to go full Marxist, and by the time you enter the workforce, you are fully inculcated in the belief that your one and only job in this world is political activism. And that all other considerations, including your actual professional duties, subordinate themselves to that activism. So the way I understand this Call of Duty thing, there was some celebrity gamer, because I guess that's a thing now, some popular guy who lots of the other gamers follow on social media or whatever, who committed the grave offense of retweeting a tweet, God, I hate that word so much, of somebody saying, just please leave the kids alone, in reference to gay and trans activists. And like we were talking about earlier, that is all it takes to be proclaimed a filthy, intolerant bigot here in the brave new world of woke. Once again, saying maybe let's not castrate little boys is just a bridge too far. That is dangerous right-wing extremism. For it is an affront against basic decency to state or to even imply that removing healthy body parts from a child is not medical care, nor is it compassion. So somehow it got back to the powers that be at Activision, the owner of Call of Duty, that this certain popular user had retweeted a tweet implying that maybe performing cosmetic double mastectomies on 14-year-old girls isn't the most wonderful, awesome thing in the world. And why did they care? Who the hell knows? The woke religion, it works in mysterious ways sometimes, but somehow through some inexplicable series of the dumbest imaginable decisions being made in this corporate boardroom, it was decided to banhammer this guy's account and disappear him from the game. And let's go back and recap quickly just to underscore the stark raving madness of the thing. A guy who plays a certain video game shares a tweet saying children maybe shouldn't get their wedding tackle hacked off for no medically indicated reason. He does it on a different platform that has nothing to do with the game, and he gets his account banned. Now, for my money, this one is even more inexplicable than the Bud Light fiasco. Again, this is a military-themed video game where the object is liquidating lots and lots of people with a firearm. There wouldn't be any reason to surmise that large sectors of the Call of Duty audience would be favorably inclined toward overt displays of LGBT activism. But that's the weird part, because there never was any such display, in this case, until after they had banned the guy. They banned him, and then a bunch of other people, fans and followers of him, presumably, started getting pissed off and self-banhammering their own accounts and uninstalling the game from their computers. And eventually it became enough of a shitstorm that Activision decided they would have to publicly respond. And what form did that response take? Well, they doubled down on the decision to ban the guy, and they gave a big rainbow-colored fuck you to the rest of their user base for good measure. We are focused on celebrating pride with our community, they tweeted, the woke sanctimony and haughtiness practically dripping off the screen. And that response sure did help matters. Not at all. So now lots and lots of people are quitting Call of Duty and uninstalling the game. There's a whole cottage industry on YouTube right now with videos of people uninstalling Call of Duty from their machines. It's actually pretty awesome. In fact, if you're one of the uninstallers, I give you an exemption from all those criticisms of video gamers that I stated earlier. So congratulations. But you should still get out more, probably. Just saying. And we'll leave it there for now. 17 days left in the greatest Pride Month ever. Let's make the most of them. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Have a splendid day and a pleasant tomorrow. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.